Like I was like,
oh really?
Is this what could happen to Kenny?
Here's a fun fact.
That's not my Kenny.
Originally when they told me about season 2, Kenny was going to be the Carver character. He basically, he was going to go crazy and he was going to be the villain, which didn't fly for whatever reason. They threw it at the wall and it slid down.
That was like the best reunion ever.
It was a nice reunion.
That was really good.
But yeah, that was originally when they were telling me about it. That was what was going to happen.
Yeah.
True story.
Emotional beat here.
Well, we actually have a question about this moment from Liddy123. They want to know, was Omid's death planned from the beginning?
Was Omid's death planned from the beginning?
From the beginning? Like, I don't...
I'm assuming of season 2.
Of season 2. Yeah, I mean, in like these early moments, I think there was talk of... so I wasn't on the project super early, so I don't know all the conversations, but I can remember like hearsay around the office. And I think there was talk about you might not have seen all of this, you know, the first time around and that kind of thing, which would lead you to wonder, and you might revisit this in further flashbacks. I think that was fairly early in development, but
it's kind of debating when the scene would happen.
Yeah,
and how much
exactly.
Would lead up to
I think from what I recall, yes, because like this I think was always going to be one of the opening bits of the season, which means that it's pretty much ironed out.
Were there any moments or ideas that were cut from episode 2 that you remember, especially any that you would have liked to keep in for whatever reason?
Let me see. I would say yes. There were lots of ideas that were there before before we settled on what we've got. As far as something that I wish we had done, I'm trying to think.
It's probably hard to kind of track back in your mind from back then, because I mean you've worked on so many projects since then that it kind of tends to get a little.
You know, there was something actually very interesting about Pete's storyline. Originally, Pete was supposed to make it back to the cabin, and he was, I believe there was, you know, we're a couple years ago now, so my memories might be failing me, but there was a thread where you had either told people he was bitten or you had not, and he was in bed and potentially going to turn, and Clementine had to deal with that. And that was a lot of the space that ended up being filled by the dread of Carver showing up directly. And I believe at the time Carver wasn't supposed to show up until the 3rd act. He was just a name that was bandied around, you know, the boogeyman for most of the story. And we had more Pete integration into this part of the story. The question of, are we going to tell, you know, who are we going to tell? Do we keep Pete's secret for a while? Is he going to turn? appear at the cabin, and I think we never really expected him to go full zombie. It was going to be one of those things where it was a threat, and he finally decided, much like he does in the current iteration, like he's not going to let. He was going to have a heroic act of staying behind when Carver's people came. If they show up, I'll deal with them. So he was always going to have that. He was always a decent guy who did for the group or did for Clementine in his last moments. But you also get perspective about what you might not be able to see as not working, or it's just not making sense. Usually, a lot of times we will have content that is, was more important at a different time in the story, and some scenes are oftentimes containing what I would call relics of importance to things that aren't in the story anymore. And oftentimes people will look at and say, I don't know why this is here. And you're like, well, this was here because it used to be more important that this character is here, or this character says this, or what have you, and
Previously, does your memory get kind of clouded sometimes of like what made it in and what didn't because of just the iterative process being so?
There was a version of this game that had a bear in it. You know what I mean?
Whoa,
so,
really?
Like we talked about a few. There were a few processes or a few sort of trajectories of the episode. I think the original. Now that I'm thinking back, I think the original ending for 2 was the opening for 3. Right.
Interesting.
So we had worked on that as being the kickoff point. So where they ended up going was a little different in the original rev of it, and that didn't line up for downstream reasons in the rest of the season. But yeah, we had a bear fighting a zombie.
Whoa.
That was a thing.
It's pretty great.
Pitching, which I think was, yeah, definitely something that we're stoked about, but can show you like the huge range of what you can end up with.
Which is funny to think about because we had one of the main characters in the Game of Thrones fight a bear. I wonder if that was sort of channeling similar.
If they maybe heard a conversation and was like,
they
that
ripped
was
you
really
off,
cool.
Guys. Game
Maybe
of Thrones
we
team.
started building half a bear, and then they're like, if you have half a bear, what if we?
It's such a good
bear?
idea. It'd be a shame to waste.
Yeah.
So.
We gave it to the Revenant. So
Right.
it's fine.
I know, right?
Got another question from the chat for you, Pierre. Any cut storylines ideas for this episode? That's from Freelance Police Fan.
Definitely. There was a bear. There was a escape through the woods type situation. I think in the first rev, the pitch, it was like post cabin and transitioning to what eventually became House was really the first half of the game.
Wow.
So you're on the run, you eventually get caught, and then you end up at House. And I think we decided that there's more drama in finding ourselves forced to deal with one another or throwing all the characters in at once. And I think that's true. So the bear thing was totally part of the escape. It was supposed to be through like a snowstorm and like, yeah.
That is like the Revenant.
Yeah, weirdly, yeah. So there was supposed to be a snowstorm. We totally had the image of the like, yeah, when bears are like trying to kill something, how they sort of like bounce on it. It looks like really playful, but it's horrifying.
Yeah.
So taking out, basically you getting into a spot where you're having to take out a couple zombies that you've come across in the woods as you're escaping. I think it's you and Kenny. Or maybe you and Luke. Maybe you were part of Luke's sort of separation, I think. And then in the midst of a zombie fight, a bear comes up and starts swatting zombies around. And
wow.
Perfect time for that to happen.
Right? Yeah. So, there you go, Leo. You're welcome. So initially, the Reggie character was just a very, 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 very tiny role. That was not at all. It just, a lot of times when you think about characters, it's sort of like, what role do they fill in the story? It's not necessarily like, what's their backstory? What do they like to eat for breakfast? How many arms do they have? Like, none of those things are
it's like,
necessarily.
what's their purpose for like the end game?
Totally. And like, how do they fit into this puzzle? So that character wasn't really expected to be a character that you even notice. It was just supposed to be someone to kind of provide context for the camp, you know? Someone to be there to go, this place doesn't suck as much as you think, you know?
It's
or whatever it is.
complicated.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. And then when we started talking about the character and as it got to expand and we started talking about Camille, it got bigger. And then it got big to a point where we hadn't planned for the character to stick around. So then we leveraged the fact that people are super into him, and as he became a tool for like making people hate Carver more.
Yeah.
You know? Recall him singing something. We thought about for a while actually the idea that
I just could use some sleep, you know.
he'd be playing a guitar and singing by a campfire at some point, and knew that Scott would be able to pull it off. So, but we already figured like we're already making Luke the dreamboat of the season. We're gonna give him a guitar and like,
Do we need him?
everybody? Like,
Do we need a
They'll
beat
be
people
like,
over the
we'll
head?
put a fan in the corner
else are
and
we
his
gonna
hair
do?
will blow in the wind.
Exactly. You know, just felt like too much. Felt like too much.
Weird to
Do memories that start flooding back to you?
Oh, one of the things that was brought up was the consideration made to like the 400 Days characters and trying to like weave their
Oh yeah.
storyline in. Like, I said that I didn't do any of that and that you did all of it.
so now I'm here and
And
you're
I said
springing on
because
me.
I don't care because I didn't work on 400 Days and you did. So
Yeah, no, we actually planned on it being a lot more robust, but then you know, the larger story stuff kind of took precedence, and it was more of a cost decision than anything else, which is a huge bummer. They were going to be woven into more places in the episode, but we ended up having to pull back on that.
I like that. Yeah, I forgot about it. I didn't mind. I also didn't mind
Kick him.
his little tirade at the end.
I think she did originally spit in his face or something here.
Oh.
Well,
ended up cutting it
it's
'cause it felt
just
a little too-
you're just
too much.
spitting into
Yeah, like
some
a
meat pile.
Spitting into some-
Was a fun environment to design. There's like,
cool.
there's some cut material around here that people might be interested in. So there's like a bunch of bullet holes in the walls, and then this like odd little barricade right here. And there's a truck that's pulled up to the front, and there's like, you know, a carpet that's, you know, thrown over the barbed wire and that kind of stuff. And so it was going to be more on the main line. We ended up just cutting it for pacing reasons, but basically there was supposed to be all these zombies, you know, are left over from raiders who were attacking this place and the survivors who were trying to defend this place. And we were trying to do this kind of atmospheric, you know, or environmental storytelling to kind of like give you this idea of this battlefield, you know, to kind of tie into the Civil War kind of motifs going on. Appeared. So you see, and if you looked through the viewfinder in the earlier walk scene, and then you can see in the background there's like the town, like the church steeple and stuff like that. I don't know if you go there in episode 5, but that was the original like location. We were trying to establish this thing, and then I think that the team kind of for episode 5 found something more interesting to do. But we were trying to establish the setting. The original, one of the versions that I don't know if we ever wrote it this way, but it was outlined as like, or it would be like running out of the woods here and that kind of thing. And so like he would be getting in trouble for having tried to stash those supplies away from the rest of his group, and that kind of thing. Kind of falls into some of those cutscenes that people were talking about. So we were imagining this thing as kind of being like a literal Mexican standoff with Spanish speakers and stuff like that, but there's so many Spanish-speaking players, and we did that once there's a Jurassic Park like Spanish puzzle that you know, quite a few of our players found very easy, you know, and that kind of thing. So we didn't want to repeat that mistake, and so that's kind of why we settled on the Russians. It's like something that would be a bit more of a smaller subsection of our players would feel like they were kind of culturally or, you know, linguistically out of step with the situation. So you would only have Arvo to depend on.
Right.
And then the great thing about the setup earlier is whether or not you stole him can color how much you can trust his translation.
Yeah.
That was what we were going for in this scene anyway. So you, Twitch, can decide how successful we were.